Did you know the Brothers Grimm never intended for their stories to be for children? The first edition of their collection, published in 1812, was a scholarly work. It was filled with notes, academic arguments, and tales of incredible darkness. A mother who wanted to eat her own children, a princess who was punished for seeing her husband's true monstrous form, a girl whose hands were chopped off by her own father. These weren't bedtime stories. They were something else. They were warnings. For centuries, before literacy was common, these stories were passed down by word of mouth, usually by women, around the hearth fire on long, dark nights. They were a kind of folk wisdom, a survival guide for a brutal and unpredictable world. A world without police, without modern medicine, without a social safety net. A world where famine was a season, the forest was full of real wolves and outlaws, and a stranger's smile could hide a knife. The tales were encoded with lessons on how to navigate this dangerous landscape. They taught you who to trust, what to fear, and how to survive when everything fell apart. So, what if we looked at these stories not as fantasies, but as historical documents? What if the wicked stepmother wasn't just a villain, but a reflection of the terrifyingly high maternal mortality rate and the harsh realities of blended families in the Middle Ages? What if the big bad wolf wasn't just an animal, but a symbol for the very real predators who lurked just beyond the village edge? What if these simple tales hold the key to understanding the medieval mind? Number 25. Why did they leave the children in the woods? The story of Hansel and Gretel is one of the most terrifying in the Grimm's collection. A father and a stepmother, facing starvation, make a cold, calculated decision. They will lead their two children deep into the forest and abandon them. They do this not once, but twice. The story is a nightmare of parental betrayal. It ends with the children finding a house made of candy, only to discover its owner is a witch who fattens children up to eat them. It's horror piled on top of horror. But this story isn't just a fantasy. It's a reflection of a real and recurring medieval catastrophe famine. The Great Famine of 1315 to 1317 was a turning point in the Middle Ages. Years of relentless rain ruined crops across Europe. Grain prices skyrocketed. People ate their seed grain, their livestock, and then, according to some chronicles, each other. The historical records from this period are grim. They speak of widespread starvation, disease, and social collapse. They mention parents abandoning children they could no longer feed. In some horrifying accounts, there are even reports of cannibalism. The historian Barbara Tuchman, in her book A Distant Mirror, The Calamitous 14th Century, paints a vivid picture of this desperation. When society's rules break down, the most vulnerable suffer first. Children, unable to fend for themselves, were often the first casualties. The act of leading Hansel and Gretel into the woods wasn't a fairy tale invention. It was a terrible practical choice that some parents were forced to make. The woods represented a slim chance of survival through foraging, or a quicker death than starving at home. The witch in the gingerbread house is also not just a monster. She represents the ultimate fear that in a world of scarcity, your neighbor might not see you as a person, but as a source of food. She is the embodiment of what happens when hunger strips away all humanity. The story, then, is a piece of brutal wisdom. It teaches that the world is not safe. It teaches that even the most fundamental bonds, like that between a parent and child, can be broken by desperation. It's a warning that civilization is a thin veneer, and when the food runs out, the monsters come out. It's a story told to prepare children for a world where hunger could turn anyone, even their own family, against them. What we still don't know is terrifying. At what precise point of starvation does the human brain override the taboo against cannibalism? If a similar global famine struck today, with our complex but fragile supply chains, would we see the same patterns of child abandonment in collapsing societies? How many undocumented cases of survival cannibalism occurred during medieval famines forever lost to history? Number 24, is the wolf just a wolf? In Little Red Riding Hood, a young girl is sent by her mother to take food to her sick grandmother. She is given one simple instruction: do not stray from the path. Of course, she does. She is distracted by the pretty flowers and the sunshine. In the woods, she meets a wolf. He seems charming, polite even. He asks her where she is going. She tells him everything. He tricks her, runs ahead to the grandmother's house, eats the old woman, puts on her clothes, and gets into bed. When Little Red Riding Hood arrives, she is eaten too. The surface level wisdom is obvious: listen to your mother and don't talk to strangers. But the medieval wisdom is deeper and darker. First, the path itself is a crucial symbol. In a world of vast untamed wilderness, the path was civilization. It was the known, the safe, the protected. To leave the path was to enter a world of chaos and danger, a place without rules. The forest was home to real wolves, which were a genuine threat to livestock and sometimes people. But the wolf in the story is more than just an animal. He talks, he schemes. He is a predator in disguise. This reflects a deep-seated medieval fear of the hidden threat. The world was full of people who were not what they seemed. A friendly traveler on the road could be a bandit. A pious neighbor could be a heretic. The wolf in grandmother's clothing is a powerful metaphor for deception. It warns that evil does not always announce itself with fangs and claws. It can wear a familiar, comforting disguise. The scholar Jack Zipes, who has extensively studied fairy tales, argues that these stories served as cautionary tales about seduction and predation, particularly for young women. The story's focus on the wolf's dialogue is key. He doesn't attack her in the woods. He uses conversation to disarm her and gather information. This was a critical lesson in a society where information was power and trust was a commodity you couldn't afford to give away freely. Telling a stranger your destination was a potentially fatal mistake. The story teaches a brutal lesson in operational security. Your plans, your vulnerabilities, your destination, these are secrets to be guarded. The wolf is not just a wolf. He is the outlaw, the predator, the charming deceiver. He is the reason you never, ever stray from the path. What do we still not understand about this story? Was the original tale, before being sanitized by the Grimms and Perrault, an explicit warning about sexual predators? How did the symbolism of the red cloak, which some interpret as a sign of sin or nascent sexuality, evolve over time? Given the historical accounts of werewolf trials like that of Peter Stump in Germany in 1589, who was accused of being a werewolf and a cannibal, how much did the line between man and beast truly blur in the medieval imagination? Number 23. Why are stepmothers always wicked? Snow White, Cinderella, Hansel and Gretel. The list goes on. The wicked stepmother is perhaps the most enduring villain in the fairy tale world. She is vain, cruel, and jealous. She plots to kill her stepdaughter or enslave her, or have her abandoned in the forest. It's easy to dismiss this as a simple storytelling device, a convenient way to create a villain without vilifying the biological mother. But the trope is so persistent because it was born from a harsh demographic reality of the medieval and early modern periods. The primary reason for the wicked stepmother was the tragically high rate of maternal mortality. Childbirth was incredibly dangerous. A woman had roughly a 1 in 100 chance of dying each time she gave birth. Over the course of several pregnancies, her cumulative risk was enormous. Many women did not survive to raise their children. This meant that it was extremely common for a man to remarry, often quickly, because he needed a woman to run the household and care for the children. This created a precarious and often tense family dynamic. The new wife, the stepmother, entered a home with existing children. From a purely practical, medieval perspective, these children were a liability to her. They were rivals to her own future children for a limited inheritance. In a world where property, titles, and wealth were passed down, the stepmother had a powerful incentive to favor her own bloodline. The historian Lawrence Stone noted that in pre-modern families, the relationships were often based more on economic necessity than on modern ideals of affection. The stepmother was often not much older than her stepdaughter. They could be rivals for the father's attention and for status within the household. The stepdaughter, especially if she was beautiful like Snow White, represented the first wife's legacy. The stepmother's jealousy in these stories isn't just about beauty. It's about power, inheritance, and securing her own position and that of her offspring. The stories, therefore, became a way of processing and articulating the very real anxieties children had about being raised by a woman who was not their own mother and whose interests might be directly opposed to theirs. The fairy tale didn't invent the wicked stepmother. It gave a name and a face to a common and frightening social reality. But what parts of this dynamic are still unknown? How many actual historical cases of abuse or disinheritance by stepmothers were quietly buried, only surviving in the coded warnings of these tales? Did the prevalence of this trope actually make life harder for loving stepmothers by creating a self-fulfilling prophecy of suspicion and mistrust? And To what extent was the wicked stepmother narrative also a tool used by children to resist a new maternal authority in the home? Number 22. What is the price of a promise? In The Frog Prince, a princess loses her golden ball in a pond. A frog offers to retrieve it for her, but he demands a price. She must promise to let him be her companion, to eat from her plate, drink from her cup, and sleep in her bed. Desperate to get her ball back, she agrees, but she has no intention of keeping her word. When the frog shows up at the castle, she is disgusted and tries to refuse. But her father, the king, insists. That which you have promised in your time of necessity, you must perform. This story is a powerful lesson about the sanctity of a promise. In the medieval world, a person's word was their bond. In a largely illiterate society, verbal contracts were often just as binding as written ones. Oaths were sworn before God and carried immense weight. Your reputation, your honor, and your social standing depended on being seen as someone who kept their promises. To break a promise was not just a personal failing, it was a social crime that could ruin you. The king's role in the story is crucial. He represents the voice of law, order, and social duty. He is not swayed by his daughter's disgust or her youthful carelessness. He understands that a promise, once made, is a debt that must be paid. The story teaches that you cannot simply make a promise when it's convenient and discard it when it becomes difficult or unpleasant. The consequences of your words are real. This was essential wisdom for survival in a world built on networks of trust and obligation. Your word could secure you a loan, an apprenticeship, or an ally in a time of conflict. A broken word could leave you isolated and vulnerable. The tale also explores the idea of looking beyond appearances. The princess is repulsed by the frog, but she is bound to him by her promise. It is only by fulfilling her obligation, even to a creature she finds disgusting, that the enchantment is broken and he is revealed as a prince. The wisdom here is twofold. First, keep your word no matter what. Second, honor and value can be hidden beneath an ugly exterior. The medieval world was full of rigid social hierarchies, but these stories often hinted that true worth was a matter of character, not just appearance or station. Fulfilling your promise to the lowest of creatures is the ultimate test of your own nobility. There are still mysteries surrounding this theme. How were verbal contracts enforced in medieval common law, and what were the typical punishments for breaking them? Did stories like The Frog Prince function as a form of legal education for the common person, teaching the principles of contract and obligation? And what is the deep psychological connection between keeping a promise and the act of transformation that we see repeated in this, and so many other tales? Number 21. Why should you be kind to a cat? The story of Puss in Boots is about a miller's youngest son who inherits nothing but a cat. His older brothers get the mill and the donkey practical assets. He gets a seemingly useless animal. He is ready to give up in despair, but the cat is no ordinary cat. He asks for a pair of boots and a bag, and through a series of clever tricks, deceptions, and strategic flattery, he transforms his penniless master into a wealthy nobleman, the Marquis of Carabas, who marries a princess. On the surface, it's a story about the triumph of the underdog, powered by a clever trickster. But the medieval wisdom is more subtle. It's about recognizing the hidden value in what seems worthless. The youngest son is at the bottom of the social and familial ladder. He is a victim of the laws of primogeniture, where the eldest son inherited almost everything. His inheritance, the cat, is a symbol of his lowly status. His initial kindness to the cat, listening to it and giving it what it asks for, is the catalyst for his entire change in fortune. This is a recurring theme. Power and help can come from the most unexpected places. It's a lesson in humility and perception. In a rigid, hierarchical society, there was a strong temptation to dismiss those below you. This story warns against that impulse. The servant, the animal, the old woman begging on the side of the road as in fairy tales, these are often powerful figures in disguise. Kindness extended to them is an investment that pays off spectacularly. Cinderella is kind to the birds and mice, and they help her create her dress for the ball. The lesson is clear, your character is revealed in how you treat those who have no power over you. The cat himself represents cleverness over brute force. He doesn't fight the ogre, he outsmarts him. He doesn't earn the wealth, he creates the illusion of it through confidence and lies. This reflects the reality of social mobility. For someone at the bottom, moving up wasn't about playing by the rules. The rules were stacked against you. It was about being resourceful, cunning, and seizing opportunities. The story is a folk fantasy of social climbing, teaching that with the right ally and a bit of audacity, even a miller's son can win the game. The initial act of wisdom, however, is not dismissing the cat. It's recognizing that an unlikely ally is still an ally. What remains unknown is the origin of the helpful animal trope. Is it rooted in pre-Christian animistic beliefs about the spirits inherent in nature? How much did the story of Puss in Boots serve as a form of social satire, mocking the gullibility of the nobility who are so easily fooled by a title and fine clothes? And could the story also be a coded warning about the dangers of trusting charismatic advisors, given that the cat's success is built entirely on a foundation of lies? Number 20, do you really know what's in the basement? In the tale of Bluebeard, a wealthy and mysterious nobleman with a blue beard marries a young woman. He has had several wives before, and they have all vanished. He tells his new wife she has the keys to the entire castle, but there is one small room in the basement she is forbidden to enter. While he is away, her curiosity consumes her. She opens the forbidden door. Inside, she finds a blood-soaked room and the dead bodies of his former wives. This terrifying story is a brutal piece of medieval wisdom about obedience and the dangers of curiosity. But it's also about something more profound. The reality that people, even those closest to you, can have monstrous secrets. The story is a warning that a prosperous and charming exterior can hide a depraved and violent nature. Bluebeard is a respected nobleman. He has wealth and status. But beneath the surface, he is a serial killer. This reflects a world without background checks or modern forensics. A person's history was often a mystery. A stranger who came to a village could be anyone. Marriage was often an economic and social arrangement, not a love match. A woman could be married off to a man she barely knew. The story of Bluebeard is a cautionary tale for women in such a vulnerable position. It warns them to be wary, to pay attention to red flags like the vanished wives, and that disobedience, while revealing a terrible truth, could also be fatal. The Forbidden Room is a powerful symbol. It represents the dark side of human nature, the secrets we keep locked away. The key represents the temptation to uncover those secrets. The story argues that some doors are best left unopened. However, most versions of the tale end with the wife being rescued by her brothers, who kill Bluebeard. This provides a second layer of wisdom, the importance of family and kinship. When her husband is revealed as a monster, it is her own blood relatives who save her. In a dangerous world, your family was your primary, and often only, source of protection. You could not rely on the law or authorities to save you from a powerful man like Bluebeard. You relied on your brothers. The story of Bluebeard is often linked to real historical figures. The 15th century French nobleman Gilles de Rais, a companion in arms of Joan of Arc, was a wealthy and respected figure who was later tried and convicted for the torture, rape, and murder of hundreds of children. His crimes were hidden for years behind his status and power. The tale serves as a chilling reminder that monsters are real, and they often wear the mask of respectability. What we still don't know is which historical figure, if any, truly inspired the tale. Was it Gilles de Rais or the 6th century Breton king Conomor the Accursed, who was said to have killed his pregnant wives? How did this story, with its themes of domestic violence and female curiosity, resonate differently in societies with varying levels of female autonomy? And why has this particular tale, unlike many others, largely fallen out of the canon of children's bedtime stories deemed too disturbing for modern ears? Number 19, Is It Better to Be a Clever Pauper or a Foolish King? The Emperor's New Clothes by Hans Christian Andersen is a later tale, but its roots and wisdom are timeless and fit the medieval mindset perfectly. Two swindlers come to the court of an emperor who is obsessed with his appearance. They claim they can weave a magical cloth that is invisible to anyone who is stupid or unfit for their office. The emperor, his ministers, and all the courtiers are terrified of being exposed. So they all pretend to see the beautiful fabric. The emperor parades through the town in his new clothes until a small child, too innocent to understand the social pressure, shouts out, but he isn't wearing anything at all. The story is a brilliant piece of wisdom about the dangers of vanity, the absurdity of social hierarchy, and the power of collective delusion. The emperor's primary flaw is his vanity. His obsession with his clothes makes him an easy target for the swindlers. This is a classic medieval warning against the sin of pride, which was seen as the root of all other sins. A leader who is more concerned with appearances than with substance is a fool who is easily manipulated. But the story is also a sharp critique of the sycophancy of court life. No one in the emperor's circle dares to speak the truth. His ministers, his officials, all lie to protect their own positions. They are more afraid of being thought stupid than they are of letting their emperor make a fool of himself. This reflects the political reality of many a medieval court, where telling the king an unpleasant truth could cost you your job or even your head. The courtiers are trapped in a web of lies, a phenomenon social psychologists now call pluralistic ignorance, where a majority of group members privately reject a norm, but incorrectly assume that most others accept it, and therefore go along with it. The hero of the story is the child. He is outside the system of power and pretense. He doesn't have a job to lose or a reputation to uphold. He simply speaks the plain, unvarnished truth. The wisdom here is profound truth often comes from the powerless, from those who have nothing to lose by speaking it. It is a reminder that wisdom is not a monopoly of the rich and powerful. Sometimes, the most insightful person in the kingdom is the one with the lowest status. The story teaches you to be skeptical of authority and to listen for the simple truths that are often drowned out by the chorus of official lies. What mysteries remain about this theme? How many historical blunders or failed policies were the result of this exact kind of courtly emperor's new clothes syndrome? Are modern corporate or political environments, with their pressures for conformity, fundamentally different from the emperor's court? And what is the neurological basis for our deep-seated fear of social shame? A fear so powerful, it can make us deny the evidence of our own eyes. Number 18. What happens when you make a deal with a monster? The story of Rumpelstiltskin begins with a foolish boast. A miller lies to the king, claiming his daughter can spin straw into gold. The king, greedy for wealth, locks the girl in a room full of straw and threatens to kill her if she fails. In her despair, a strange little man, a goblin-like creature, appears. He offers to spin the straw into gold for her. The first time, she gives him her necklace. The second time, her ring. The third time, she has nothing left to give, so she promises him her firstborn child. This story is a complex tapestry of medieval wisdom. The first lesson is about the danger of idle boasts and the greed of the powerful. The miller's lie puts his daughter's life in mortal danger. The king's greed is absolute. He is willing to kill for wealth. It's a cynical and realistic portrayal of how the powerless can be trapped by the whims of those above them. The core of the story, however, is about the nature of contracts and the danger of making desperate bargains. The girl makes a deal with a supernatural entity, a monster, to save her own life. She trades away something she doesn't yet have, her future child, to solve her immediate problem. This is a profound warning about debt. The deals you make in desperation will always come back to haunt you. The price may seem abstract at first, but the day of collection will arrive. Rumpelstiltskin is the ultimate predatory lender. The climax of the story revolves around the power of a name. The only way the queen can save her child is to guess the little man's name. In many ancient and medieval cultures, a true name held power over a person or a spirit. To know something's name was to have a degree of control over it. This is why Rumpelstiltskin guards his name so jealously. When his name is spoken, his power is broken. The wisdom here is that knowledge is power. The queen doesn't defeat him with force, she defeats him with information, gathered by a loyal messenger. It's a lesson that even the most terrifying threats can be overcome, not by strength, but by intelligence and investigation. But there are still questions. What is the folkloric origin of Rumpelstiltskin-like creatures, these deal-making imps that appear in so many cultures? To what extent does the story reflect anxieties about infant mortality and the fear of changelings, fairies, or spirits who were believed to steal human babies? And why is the act of spinning, a common female domestic task, so often linked in fairy tales with magic, fate, and danger? Number 17, should you build your house with straw, sticks, or bricks? The Three Little Pigs is often seen as a simple nursery tale, but its original versions were much darker, and the wisdom it contains is fundamental to survival. 3 pigs are sent out into the world to seek their fortune. The first pig is lazy. He builds his house out of straw because it's the easiest and quickest option. The second pig is a little less lazy. He builds his house out of sticks. The third pig is hardworking and methodical. He takes the time and effort to build a strong house out of bricks. When the wolf comes, he easily blows down the houses of straw and sticks and eats the first 2 pigs. But he cannot blow down the house of bricks. The core lesson is about the value of hard work, preparation, and foresight. In a world full of wolves, dangers, both literal and metaphorical shortcuts lead to disaster. The first two pigs prioritize immediate gratification and ease over long-term security. The third pig understands that survival requires investment. He delays his gratification, puts in the hard work, and builds something that will last. This is a deeply practical piece of medieval wisdom. Life was precarious. A poorly built house could collapse in a storm. Weak fences couldn't keep out predators or thieves. A failure to properly store food for the winter would lead to starvation. The story is an allegory for life in a world with no safety nets. The quality of your work, your preparation, directly determined whether you lived or died. The wolf is not just an antagonist, he is a force of nature, a test. He is the storm, the famine, the bandit raid. He is the inevitable crisis that will come for everyone. The only question is whether you will be ready when he arrives. The story also contains a lesson about material reality. Straw is not as strong as sticks. Sticks are not as strong as bricks. This seems obvious, but it's a lesson in understanding the properties of the world around you. To survive, you needed to be a practical engineer of your own life. You needed to know which wood was best for building, which stone was strongest, which methods of construction would endure. The story champions not just hard work, but smart work, based on an understanding of the physical world. It's a rejection of wishful thinking in favor of solid, tangible reality. What aspects of this tale are still a mystery? In the earliest printed versions from the 19th century, the wolf eats the first two pigs and is then outsmarted and killed by the third. How did the story change in its oral tradition before that point? Could the three material straw, sticks, and bricks also represent different social classes, with the brick house symbolizing the greater security of the established merchant or gentry class? And why is the pig, an animal often associated with greed or uncleanliness, the hero of this story about prudence and hard work? Number 16, are you a carp or a pike? The Ugly Duckling is another of Hans Christian Andersen's tales, but its central theme of transformation and hidden identity resonates with older folkloric traditions. A mother duck hatches a brood of ducklings, one of them is large, gray, and ugly. He is relentlessly bullied and ostracized by the other ducks, the chickens, the turkey, and even his own family. He is rejected everywhere he goes. He spends a miserable and lonely year suffering through the seasons. Finally, in the spring, he sees a flock of beautiful swans. He decides to approach them, expecting to be killed. But as he bows his head, he sees his own reflection in the water. He is not an ugly duckling. He is a swan. The medieval wisdom hidden in this story is about endurance, identity, and the nature of social status. The ugly duckling's suffering is a powerful metaphor for the experience of being an outsider. In the tightly knit, conformist communities of the medieval world, being different could be a death sentence. The story acknowledges the cruelty of the social world, the tendency of the group to attack anyone who doesn't fit in. The lesson for those who feel like outsiders is one of perseverance. The duckling doesn't try to fight back or change himself to please others. He simply endures. The core of the story, however, is the revelation that the duckling was never a duck at all. His worth was not determined by the opinions of the ducks in the farmyard. His identity was innate. He was born a swan. This is a profound piece of wisdom about intrinsic value. It suggests that your true nature is not defined by your current circumstances or the judgment of those around you. This idea would have been a powerful comfort to anyone feeling trapped by the rigid social hierarchy of the time. You may live in the mud of the farmyard now, but your destiny could be in the sky. The story can be read in two ways. One reading is conservative. It reinforces the idea of a natural aristocracy. The swan is noble by birth, and the ducks are commoners. His superiority is in his blood. This aligns with a medieval worldview of fixed social orders. A second, more subversive reading is about personal transformation. It suggests that suffering can lead to growth, and that one's true self can be discovered through adversity. The medieval world was full of stories of saints who were misunderstood and persecuted before their true holiness was revealed, or of knights of humble birth whose noble deeds revealed their true character. The Ugly Duckling taps into this deep cultural narrative of hidden nobility. As the 17th century writer James Howell wrote in a proverb, "Every man is the son of his own works." What questions does this tale leave us with? To what extent was Andersen, who came from a poor background himself, writing an allegory for his own social struggles and eventual acceptance? How did this story, which seems to champion individualism, function in a society that was deeply collectivist? And does the story ultimately offer false hope, suggesting that worth is a matter of birthright, being a swan, rather than something that can be achieved by anyone? A duck can't become a swan. Number 15, why is the forest always dark and full of monsters? In countless fairy tales, the hero or heroine must pass through a dark, menacing forest. It is the place where Little Red Riding Hood meets the wolf. It is where Hansel and Gretel are abandoned. It is where Snow White flees to escape the huntsman. The forest is never a pleasant, sun-dappled wood. It is a place of confusion, danger, and transformation. It is a threshold between the known world of the village and the unknown world of magic and monsters. This depiction of the forest was not a fantasy. It was the lived reality for medieval Europeans. At the start of the Middle Ages, much of Europe was covered in vast, dense, primeval forest. These were not the managed woodlands we know today. They were dark, dangerous, and largely unmapped. The forest was the realm outside of human law and control. It was home to predators like wolves and bears. It was also a refuge for outlaws, bandits, and anyone else living on the margins of society. To enter the forest was to leave the safety of your community and take your life into your hands. The forest was also a place of psychological terror. Its darkness and disorientation could easily lead a traveler astray. The fear of getting lost was a very real and often fatal one. The folk tales reflect this deep-seated anxiety. The path, as we saw with Little Red Riding Hood, is a recurring symbol of safety and order. To step off the path is to give in to chaos. The forest in these stories is a physical manifestation of the subconscious mind. It's a place where you have to confront your deepest fears. The monsters you meet there, the witches, the wolves, the ogres, are externalizations of internal anxieties. The medieval wisdom encoded in these tales is that to grow, to change, to reach your destination, you must be willing to pass through this dark place. The forest is a place of trial. Snow White enters the forest as a naive child and emerges after her ordeal ready to be a queen. The journey through the woods is a rite of passage. It teaches that you cannot avoid danger and fear. You must confront them. The forest is where you prove your courage, your resourcefulness, and your worth. It is a necessary crucible. As the psychoanalyst Bruno Bettelheim argued in The Uses of Enchantment, these stories tell children that a struggle against severe difficulties in life is unavoidable, but that if one does not shy away, one can emerge victorious. What do we still not know about the historical perception of the forest? How did the gradual deforestation of Europe over the centuries change the way these stories were told and understood? Are there regional variations in fairy tales that reflect the specific dangers of different types of landscapes, forests, mountains, swamps? And how has the modern loss of true wilderness affected our psychological landscape and the stories we tell ourselves about the unknown? Number 14, does greed ever pay? The story of the fisherman and his wife is a stark lesson in the corrosive nature of greed. A poor fisherman catches an enchanted fish who is actually a prince. The fish begs for his life, and the fisherman lets him go. When the fisherman tells his wife, she is furious. She insists he go back and ask the fish for a reward. She demands a small cottage. The fish grants it, but she is not satisfied. She demands a stone castle. Then to be king, then emperor, then pope. With each escalating demand, the sea grows darker and more turbulent. Finally, she demands to be like God, to control the sun and the moon. At this, the fish has had enough. He sends them back to their original state, living in a filthy hovel. This tale is a powerful piece of medieval wisdom about the sin of avarice or greed. In Christian theology of the period, greed was one of the 7 deadly sins. It was seen as a spiritual sickness, an insatiable desire for more that could never be filled. The fisherman's wife is the perfect embodiment of this. No matter what she gets, it is never enough. Her ambition is limitless, and it leads directly to her ruin. The story reflects the medieval social order, which was seen as a great chain of being, a divinely ordained hierarchy where everyone had their proper place. The wife's desire to be king, emperor, and then pope is a direct challenge to this order. It is an act of supreme arrogance or hubris. Her final demand to be like goddess is the ultimate transgression, echoing the original sin of Adam and Eve. The story reinforces the idea that you should be content with your lot in life. To strive too far beyond your station is to invite divine retribution. The state of the sea is a crucial element. As the wife's greed grows, the world around her becomes more chaotic and violent. This reflects a belief that human moral corruption has consequences in the natural world. The storm is a physical manifestation of the spiritual sickness of greed. The wisdom is clear, unchecked ambition, and greed do not just destroy the individual, they threaten to bring chaos to the entire world. The tale teaches that true wealth is not in possessions, but in contentment. The fisherman and his wife were poor in their hovel, but they were not in a state of turmoil until the greed began. Their poverty was better than the anxiety and madness that came with their temporary power. But what are the deeper origins of this tale? Is the enchanted fish a representation of a pagan nature deity, punishing humans for their disrespect? How did a story that seems to endorse social passivity, be happy with your lot, coexist with tales like Puss in Boots, which celebrate social climbing? And is the wife's character a reflection of medieval misogyny, portraying female ambition as inherently destructive and unnatural? Number 13, who really holds the power in the family? In the story Jack and the Beanstalk, we meet a boy named Jack who lives in poverty with his widowed mother. The mother is a practical, no-nonsense figure. When their cow, Milky White, stops giving milk, she makes the hard decision to sell it. She sends Jack to the market with clear instructions. Jack, however, is a dreamer. He trades the cow not for money, but for a handful of magic beans. When he gets home, his mother is furious. She throws the beans out the window and, in some versions, beats him and sends him to bed without supper. This opening scene contains a fascinating piece of medieval wisdom about family dynamics and the harsh realities of poverty. The mother holds the real authority in the household. In the absence of her husband, she is the one responsible for their survival. Her decision to sell the cow is not cruel. It is a necessary, heartbreaking choice driven by economic reality. Her anger at Jack is not just about his disobedience, it's about the fact that his foolishness has potentially condemned them to starvation. She is the voice of practicality in a world with no margin for error. Jack represents youth, risk-taking, and a belief in the miraculous. He makes a terrible business decision from a practical standpoint, but a brilliant one from a fairy tale perspective. The conflict between mother and son is a conflict between two worldviews. The grim, pragmatic reality of the adult world versus the hopeful, magical thinking of youth. The story ultimately vindicates Jack's choice, but the initial lesson from his mother's perspective is a stark one. In a medieval household, especially a poor one, every member had a role and a responsibility. A child's failure to perform their duty could have catastrophic consequences for the entire family. The wisdom here is that survival depends on everyone following the rules and making sensible choices. Jack's mother represents the social order and the burden of responsibility. Her anger is the fear of every parent who sees a child squander their last hope. The story acknowledges the validity of her rage before it moves into the realm of fantasy. It's a reminder that before the magic, there is the cold, hard reality of an empty pantry. What are the unanswered questions about this family dynamic? Given that Jack lives with a single mother, how does the story reflect the precarious social and economic position of widows in the medieval period? Is Jack's theft from the giant justified as a form of reclaiming wealth from an oppressive upper class, making him a proletarian hero? And how did the perception of Jack's character change over time, from a reckless trickster in early versions to a more heroic figure in later ones? Number 12. Why are there so many dwarfs, goblins, and fairies? The world of medieval fairy tales is crowded with non-human beings. Snow White finds refuge with 7 dwarfs who are skilled miners. Rumpelstiltskin is a goblin who can spin gold. Fairies, or the good folk, are powerful, capricious beings who might bless a child or steal it from its cradle. These creatures were not seen as mere fantasy. They were a part of the medieval worldview, an explanation for the unexplainable. The wisdom behind the belief in these beings is a way of understanding and interacting with a world that was often mysterious and frightening. The dwarfs in Snow White are not just short men. They live deep in the earth and are masters of mining and metalwork. They represent the hidden treasures and secrets of the natural world. Belief in such earth spirits or gnomes was common among miners. These beings were a way of personifying the dangers and riches of the underground world. To survive as a miner, you had to respect the mountain, and that respect was expressed through stories about its hidden inhabitants. Goblins and imps, like Rumpelstiltskin often represented the malevolent or mischievous forces in the world. They were a way to explain sudden misfortune. Did your milk turn sour? Did a tool go missing? Did a child fall ill? It might be the work of a goblin. These stories provided a narrative for chaos. They weren't just superstitions, they were a primitive form of risk management. By leaving out a bowl of milk or following certain rituals, you might appease these creatures and ward off bad luck. The fairies, in particular, were treated with immense respect and fear. As the folklorist Catherine Briggs documented, they were seen as a powerful ancient race living in a parallel world. They were not the tiny, winged sprites of Victorian art, they were formidable, amoral beings. An encounter with them could bring great fortune or utter ruin. The belief in fairies taught a profound lesson about respecting the unknown. There are forces in the world that are older and more powerful than you. You do not understand their rules. Meddle with them at your peril. This was a crucial piece of wisdom in a world without scientific explanations for many natural phenomena. It fostered a sense of caution and humility in the face of the great, mysterious powers of the world. What do we still not know about these beliefs? How much did the Christian church actively try to suppress these pagan beliefs? And how much did they simply absorb them by turning fairies and spirits into demons? Are there archaeological and anthropological clues that point to the origins of specific creatures like the dwarfs' connection to ancient mining communities? And how did the transition from an oral to a written culture fundamentally change the nature of these beings, codifying their characteristics and reducing their mystery? Number 11 is beauty a blessing or a curse? In fairy tales, beauty is a double-edged sword. It is often the heroine's defining characteristic, but it is also the source of all her trouble. Snow White is the fairest of them all, and for this, her stepmother tries to have her murdered. Cinderella's beauty makes her sisters jealous and cruel. In many tales, beauty attracts unwanted attention from lustful kings, evil sorcerers, or monsters. It is a quality that marks the heroine for both greatness and suffering. The medieval wisdom here is a complex and often cynical take on the role of women. In a patriarchal society, a woman's beauty was one of her greatest assets. It was social capital. It could attract a wealthy and powerful husband, elevating her status and that of her family. This is the blessing side of the equation. The ultimate reward in many of these stories is marriage to a prince. But the curse side was just as real. A woman's beauty made her a target. It could provoke envy and rivalry from other women, as seen with Snow White's stepmother. More dangerously, it could attract the predatory attention of powerful men. In a world where women had few legal rights and protections, beauty could make them vulnerable to abduction, assault, and forced marriage. The stories are a stark warning that being beautiful is not enough to keep you safe. In fact, it can put you in greater danger. The tales also teach that true worth is more than skin deep. The beautiful but cruel stepsisters in Cinderella are punished in the end. The beautiful but vain queen in Snow White is destroyed by her own envy. The heroines who triumph, like Cinderella and Snow White, are not just beautiful, they are also kind, patient, and resilient. The wisdom is that beauty is a gift, but it is a dangerous one. It must be paired with inner virtue to have any real value. The story served as a conduct manual for young women, teaching them to be modest and virtuous, to not rely on their looks alone, and to be constantly aware of the dangers their appearance might attract. What are the unexplored nuances of this theme? How did the standards of beauty in the medieval period, which we can see in art and literature, shape the descriptions of heroines in these tales? Did the stories focus on passive, beautiful heroines who are rescued by men, reinforce the patriarchal social structure, or did they offer a subversive message about the power of female endurance? And how did the tale's treatment of male beauty differ from that of female beauty? Number 10, can you trust a king? Kings, princes, and noblemen are everywhere in fairy tales. They are the ultimate prize for the heroine, the source of authority, and often the instigators of the plot. But they are not always good. For every charming prince who rescues a princess, there's a greedy, cruel, or foolish king who causes nothing but trouble. The king in Rumpelstiltskin is a perfect example. He is driven by pure greed. He is willing to execute an innocent girl if she cannot perform an impossible task. The king in The Frog Prince is a stern but just father enforcing a promise. Bluebeard is a nobleman and a serial killer. The emperor with no clothes is a vain fool. This varied portrayal of royalty reflects a deeply realistic and often cynical medieval worldview. The wisdom is simple, power corrupts. The common folk who told these stories understood that kings and lords were not inherently noble or just simply because of their birth. They were just men, susceptible to the same sins of greed, pride, and cruelty as anyone else, and their power made those sins far more dangerous. The stories are a form of political commentary, a safe way to critique the ruling class without committing treason. You couldn't say our lord is a greedy tyrant, but you could tell a story about a fictional king who was. These tales taught a lesson in cautious subservience. You had to obey the king, but you should never naively trust him. His interests were not your interests. He could be a source of justice and reward, but he could also be a source of arbitrary cruelty and death. These stories reflect the precarious relationship between the ruler and the ruled. The life of a peasant or a miller's daughter could be turned upside down by a single royal command. The fairy tale world, with its unpredictable and often tyrannical kings, was an accurate reflection of the political reality for most people. It was a world where you kept your head down, hoped for a good ruler, and prepared for a bad one. What aspects of this political commentary are still hidden? Where specific tales targeted critiques of actual, living monarchs, with the details changed just enough to be deniable. How did the portrayal of kings and nobles change in stories collected from different regions, for example, in the independent city-states of Germany versus the centralized monarchy of France? And could the recurring motif of a commoner marrying a prince be a form of wish fulfillment, a fantasy of bridging the impassable gap between the rulers and the ruled? Number 9. What is the point of impossible tasks? A common feature in fairy tales is the impossible task. The hero must sort a pile of mixed grains in a single night. The heroine must spin straw into gold. A suitor must answer 3 unanswerable riddles to win the princess's hand. From a logical perspective, these tasks are absurd. But from a folkloric perspective, they are a crucial test of character. The medieval wisdom behind the impossible task is that brute force and conventional thinking are not enough to solve life's greatest challenges. When the miller's daughter is locked in the room with the straw, she doesn't try to spin it. She weeps. Her tears of desperation summon the magical helper, Rumpelstiltskin. When Cinderella needs a dress for the ball, she doesn't try to sew one from rags. Her kindness to animals summons them to help her. The lesson is that when you are faced with a problem that is beyond your own strength and skill, you must rely on other virtues. These often include humility, admitting you cannot do it alone, kindness, which attracts magical allies, and cleverness, finding an unconventional solution. The hero who succeeds is often the one who is clever enough to get help or humble enough to accept it from a strange or lowly source. These tasks are also a metaphor for the overwhelming challenges of life. For a medieval peasant, survival itself could often feel like an impossible task. How do you feed a family through a long winter with a poor harvest? How do you protect your home from bandits or disease? The stories don't offer practical solutions. Instead, they offer a psychological one. They teach that even when a situation seems hopeless, there may be a hidden solution. They encourage a mindset of resourcefulness and a faith that help can appear from unexpected places. The impossible task is a way of separating the worthy hero from the unworthy. The arrogant older brothers almost always try to solve the task with force and fail. The humble youngest son succeeds because he is willing to think differently or to be kind to the old woman who gives him the magic key. The story teaches that your character, not your strength, is the ultimate tool for overcoming the impossible. As the Latin proverb goes, fortes fortuna aduvat, fortune favors the brave. But in fairy tales, fortune favors the humble, the kind, and the clever. What are the deep psychological roots of the impossible task motif? Does it relate to initiation rites in ancient cultures, where a candidate had to undergo a severe ordeal to prove their worth? Are there connections between the types of tasks given in fairy tales and the specific economic activities of the regions they came from, e.g., tasks involving grain and farming communities? And how does the concept of divine or magical intervention in these tasks reflect the religious or spiritual beliefs of the people who told them? Number 8. Why do you have to go on a quest? So many stories are built around a quest. A hero must journey to a distant land to find a magical sword, or a healing herb, or a captured princess. The quest is the engine of the narrative, the structure on which everything else is built. It is not just a journey from point A to point B, It is a process of transformation. The wisdom of the quest is that growth requires movement. You cannot become the person you are meant to be by staying home. You must leave the familiar, the comfortable, the safe, and venture out into the dangerous and unknown world. The hero at the beginning of the quest is often naive, untested, and incomplete. The hero who returns at the end is wise, proven, and whole. The journey itself is what forges them. This reflects a deep truth about the medieval world. For many people, life was static. You were born in a village, and you died in that village, but there were also powerful traditions of journeying. There were religious pilgrimages like the journey to Santiago de Compostela or Jerusalem. Young men might leave home to become apprentices or to seek their fortune as soldiers or merchants. The quest narrative captures the anxieties and the allure of such journeys. The quest is a structured way of encountering the world. Along the way, the hero will face tests, meet allies and enemies, and acquire new skills and knowledge. The magical objects they find are often metaphors for the inner resources they discover within themselves. The sword is courage, the map is wisdom, the healing herb is compassion. The quest teaches that the world is full of challenges, but also full of help, if you know where to look for it. It's a lesson in resilience and resourcefulness. Most importantly, the quest has a purpose. The hero isn't just wandering aimlessly, they have a clear goal that drives them forward through every hardship. This is a crucial piece of wisdom. A life without purpose is just a series of random events. A life structured as a quest, even a difficult one, has meaning. The story of the quest is a map for a meaningful life. Leave home, face your trials, acquire wisdom, and return transformed. As the mythologist Joseph Campbell outlined in his work, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, this hero's journey is a universal pattern found in myths and stories across the world. What are the historical precedents for the fairy tale quest? How much were they influenced by the epic poems of chivalric romance, with their tales of knights searching for the Holy Grail? Does the nature of the quest object, a person to be rescued, an object to be found, a monster to be slain by me, tell us something about the values of the society that created the story? And in our modern globalized world, what does a quest look like, and have we lost the transformative power of the journey? Number 7, are you your brother's keeper? The relationship between siblings in fairy tales is rarely simple. It is often a source of intense conflict and rivalry. The most common motif is the tension between two older, wicked siblings and one younger, virtuous one. In Cinderella, the stepsisters are cruel and abusive. In many tales, the two older brothers are arrogant and selfish, and they plot against their younger brother. This reflects the harsh realities of inheritance and family structure in the medieval period. The system of primogeniture, where the eldest son inherited the vast majority of the family's land and wealth, created a natural and often brutal rivalry. The eldest son had a secure future. The younger sons had to make their own way in the world, often with very little. This could lead to deep resentment and conflict. The fairy tales are a direct expression of this tension. They are often told from the perspective of the youngest child, the underdog. The wisdom here is a warning about the corrosive power of envy within a family. The older siblings are often consumed by jealousy of the younger one's good fortune or good character. Their envy leads them to commit wicked acts, and for this they are always punished in the end. The stories are a moral lesson. Your sibling may be your rival, but to act on that rivalry with cruelty will lead to your own downfall. However, there is another side to this. While many tales focus on sibling rivalry, others, like the 12 Brothers or the Six Swans, are about profound sibling loyalty. In these stories, a sister will endure years of silent suffering or perform impossible tasks to save her brothers who have been turned into birds. Here, the wisdom is the opposite. The bond between siblings is the most powerful force in the world, capable of breaking the strongest enchantments. Taken together, these two types of stories present a complete picture of sibling relationships. The bond is a source of both the greatest potential conflict and the greatest potential loyalty. The tales teach that family is the central arena of your life. How you navigate the relationships with your siblings will determine your fate. It's a choice between the path of envy and the path of loyalty. The stories make it very clear which path leads to happiness. What do we still not know about the historical reality behind these stories? How common was actual violence or sabotage between siblings over inheritance? Were the stories of extreme sibling loyalty meant as an ideal to counteract the harsh reality of primogeniture? And why are so many of the stories about saving enchanted brothers focused on the sacrifice of a sister, reflecting a specific gender role in maintaining family unity. Number 6, what is the difference between cleverness and wisdom? In many fairy tales, the hero is not strong or brave or noble. The hero is clever. He is a trickster. Puss in Boots is a liar and a manipulator. Jack of Beanstalk fame is a thief. Many heroes succeed by outwitting their opponents rather than overpowering them. There is a clear admiration in these tales for a sharp mind. This celebrates a crucial survival skill for the common person. A peasant could not defeat a knight in a sword fight. A miller's son could not challenge a king. In a world where you are at the bottom of the power structure, direct confrontation is suicide. Your only weapon is your mind. The stories of the trickster hero are a form of wish fulfillment for the powerless. They show that even the most formidable giant or the most powerful ogre can be brought down by a clever plan. This is the wisdom of cleverness. It is the great equalizer. It allows the small to defeat the large, the poor to outwit the rich. It's a pragmatic, amoral kind of intelligence. The trickster hero often bends the rules and engages in deception to achieve his goals. The stories seem to say that when you are playing against a system that is rigged against you, you don't have to play fair. However, the tales also make a distinction between this kind of cleverness and true wisdom. Cleverness is about short-term gain, about tricking the ogre and stealing his gold. Wisdom is about understanding the deeper truths of the world. The wise characters in fairy tales are often not the heroes themselves, but the old women, the hermits, or the talking animals who give the hero advice. The wise figure understands the rules of magic. They know that you must be kind to the frog, that you must not stray from the path, that you must keep your promises. The hero's journey is often a process of learning to listen to this wisdom. The clever hero who is also wise is the one who ultimately succeeds. The one who is merely clever may win the battle but lose the war. The ultimate lesson is that while a sharp mind is a valuable tool for survival, a good heart and an understanding of the moral laws of the universe are what lead to a happy ending. What are the folkloric origins of the trickster figure, who appears in almost every culture's mythology? How did the Christian church, which valued humility and honesty, view these popular stories that celebrated deception and theft? And is there a fundamental tension in these tales between the pragmatic, anything goes, morality of the trickster and the more rigid karmic justice that usually concludes the story? Number 5. Why do you always meet a helpful old woman on the road? The figure of the helpful hag, or the wise old woman, is a staple of fairy tales. The hero is on his journey, often at his lowest point, and he meets an old woman. She might be begging for a piece of bread or a kind word. The hero's arrogant older brothers will typically insult her and push her aside. The hero, the youngest and kindest son, will share his meager food with her. In return, she gives him a crucial piece of advice or a magical object that allows him to succeed in his quest. This character is a vessel for a powerful piece of medieval wisdom: respect your elders. In a pre-literate society, the elderly were the libraries of the community. They held the accumulated knowledge, the stories, the history, and the practical skills of generations. Their wisdom was a vital resource. To disrespect an elder was not just rude, it was foolish. It was cutting yourself off from the most important source of information you had. The old woman in the story is a test of the hero's character. His willingness to show her kindness and respect demonstrates his humility and his good heart. It proves that he is worthy of the magical help he is about to receive. The story teaches that your attitude towards the old, the poor, and the powerless reveals your true nature. This figure is also a reflection of the ambiguous social position of old women, particularly widows, in medieval society. They could be respected figures of wisdom, but they could also be outcasts living on the margins of the village dependent on charity. An old woman living alone, perhaps with knowledge of herbs and folk remedies, could easily be suspected of being a witch. The fairy tale figure captures this duality. She can be a benevolent helper, a fairy godmother, or a malevolent witch. Which one you encounter depends entirely on how you treat her. The wisdom is that you should always err on the side of kindness, because you never know who you are dealing with. What are the pre-Christian origins of this figure? Is she a demoted version of an ancient pagan goddess of wisdom or fate? How did the great witch hunts of the early modern period, from roughly 1450 to 1750, affect the portrayal of old women in these orally transmitted tales? And why is the source of magical wisdom so often female, while the hero who acts on that wisdom is so often male. Number 4. Is there magic in the world? The world of fairy tales is saturated with magic. Pumpkins turn into coaches, frogs turn into princes, and a single being can grow into a stalk that reaches the clouds. For the modern reader, this is the element of fantasy, the part of the story that is clearly not real. But for the medieval mind, the line between the natural and the supernatural was much blurrier. The wisdom of magic in fairy tales is that the world is not always what it seems. It is a place of mystery, wonder, and hidden forces. This was a world without a scientific framework to explain everything. Magic was a way of understanding causality. An enchanted object was not just a plot device, it was a way of thinking about how power and influence worked in the world. A magical sword didn't just represent courage, it was a physical embodiment of it. The magic in these stories follows certain rules. It is often transactional. You get help from a magical creature by showing it kindness. You break a curse by performing a specific act or speaking a certain word. This reflects a worldview where the universe is governed by a set of invisible laws. If you understand these laws, you can navigate the world successfully. If you break them by breaking a promise, being cruel, or entering a forbidden room, you will suffer the consequences. So magic in fairy tales is a system of cause and effect for the moral and spiritual world. Belief in magic also fostered a sense of possibility in a world that was often grim and deterministic. For a peasant trapped in a life of hard labor, the idea that a fairy could appear and grant a wish, or that a goose could lay a golden egg, was a powerful source of hope. It suggested that your destiny was not entirely fixed by your birth. The world was mysterious, and in that mystery, there was the potential for miraculous change. The stories taught you to be open to the possibility of wonder, to look for the enchantment hidden just beneath the surface of everyday life. But what do we not understand about the nature of this belief? How did the common person's belief in folk magic interact with the official doctrines of the church? Were the magical elements of fairy tales a form of coded pagan belief that survived into the Christian era? And as the scientific worldview began to take hold during the Enlightenment, how did the storytellers and collectors like the Grimms begin to reinterpret the role of magic in these ancient tales? Number 3, does good always triumph over evil? One of the most comforting aspects of fairy tales is that they almost always have a happy ending. Cinderella marries the prince, and her stepsisters are punished. The third little pig is safe in his brick house, and the wolf is defeated. Snow White is awakened by the prince, and the wicked queen is forced to dance to her death in red-hot iron shoes. The stories provide a powerful sense of moral order and justice. The medieval wisdom here is not that the world is a just place. The people telling and hearing these stories knew very well that it was not. They saw injustice every day. The wicked often prospered, and the innocent suffered. The fairy tale ending was not a reflection of reality. It was a statement of what reality should be. It was an expression of a deep human need for justice. The stories taught a kind of karmic morality. Your actions have consequences. If you are virtuous, kind, and resilient, you will eventually be rewarded, even if you have to suffer a great deal first. If you are cruel, envious, and greedy, you will eventually be punished, often in a gruesome and fitting way. The punishment of the villains is a crucial part of the story. The stepsisters being blinded by birds, the queen dancing in hot shoes. These are not just cruel details. They are a form of symbolic justice. The punishment fits the crime. This belief in an ultimate, balancing justice was a powerful psychological tool for survival in a harsh world. It gave meaning to suffering. Your current hardship was not meaningless, it was a test of your virtue. It also provided a sense of hope that the tyrants and oppressors of the world would one day get what they deserved, if not in this life, then in the next. The fairy tale is a temporary escape into a world where the moral compass is true, where good is rewarded and evil is punished. It's not a description of the world, but a prescription for it. What remains a mystery is the sheer brutality of the justice in the original Grimm's tales. Why was it so important for the punishment to be so graphic and violent? Did this serve as a form of emotional catharsis for a powerless audience? And as the tales were sanitized for children over the past 2 centuries, what essential wisdom about the nature of justice have we lost? Number 2, what are you most afraid of? If you look at all the fairy tales together, you can compile a list of the fundamental fears of the medieval world. The first and most primal fear is starvation. It is the engine that drives the plot of Hansel and Gretel and many other stories. The fear of being eaten by a witch, a wolf, or a giantess is a direct extension of this. In a world of scarcity, you are either a consumer or you are consumed. The second great fear is the fear of the wilderness, of getting lost in the dark forest and never finding your way home. This is the fear of chaos, of leaving the small known world of the village and being swallowed by the vast, dangerous unknown. The third fear is the fear of the powerful and the arbitrary cruelty they can inflict. A foolish boast to a greedy king can get you killed. A vain queen can order your heart cut out. The stories are filled with an understanding that your life can be destroyed on the whim of someone with more power than you. The fourth fear is the fear of betrayal by those closest to you. Parents abandon their children. Siblings plot against each other. A husband can be a monster. These stories acknowledge the terrifying truth that the greatest danger may not come from the wolf in the forest, but from the person sleeping next to you. The wisdom of these tales is not to pretend that these fears don't exist. The stories look directly at the darkest aspects of the human condition and the natural world. They give these fears a name and a face. The witch in the gingerbread house is the fear of starvation personified. The wolf is the fear of predation. Bluebeard is the fear of betrayal. By giving these fears a narrative form, the stories make them manageable. They teach you that monsters can be outwitted, witches can be pushed into ovens, tyrants can be overthrown. The stories do not promise a life without fear. Instead, they provide a strategy for confronting it. They are a form of exposure therapy, a way to face the worst the world has to offer in the safe space of a story, so you will be better prepared to face it in real life. What do we still not understand about the hierarchy of these fears? Did the fear of damnation and hell, so prevalent in official religious teaching, manifest itself in these folk tales in coded ways? How did major historical events like the Black Death, which killed a third of Europe's population in the 1340s, create new fears that found their way into the storytelling tradition? And in our modern world, have we truly conquered these ancient fears, or have they simply changed their shape? Number one, how do you survive? After all the quests, the magic, the monsters, and the morals, what is the single most important piece of wisdom hidden in these old tales? It is this: the world is a dangerous place, but it is not without hope. Survival in the world of the fairy tale is never a matter of luck alone. It is a matter of character. The heroes and heroines who survive are the ones who possess a specific set of virtues. First, they are resilient, they suffer terribly, they are abandoned, enslaved, cursed, and hunted. But they do not give up. Cinderella endures years of abuse. The ugly duckling survives a brutal winter alone. They have a deep, quiet strength that allows them to persevere through the darkest of times. Second, they are resourceful. They are not always strong, but they are clever. They know how to think their way out of a problem, how to outwit a giant, how to get help when they need it. They are good observers of the world around them. Third, they are kind. This is perhaps the most crucial virtue. Their kindness to a beggar, an animal, or a frog is almost always the turning point in their story. It is the act that brings them a magical ally or a crucial piece of information. In a world that is often cruel and selfish, kindness is a radical and powerful act. And finally, they have hope. In their darkest moments, they retain a belief that their situation can change, that justice will prevail, that the morning will come. This hope is not a passive wish, it is an active force that fuels their resilience and their will to live. This is the ultimate survival guide. The world will test you, it will be unfair. It will be full of wolves and witches, but if you can endure, if you can be clever, if you can be kind, and if you can hold on to hope, you can survive. You can make it through the dark forest, you can build a house strong enough to withstand the wolf. You can find your way home. This is the simple, brutal, and beautiful wisdom that was whispered around the fire from one generation to the next, a light in the long, medieval dark. But what is the final unanswered question? In our modern world, with all its new and complex dangers, are these simple virtues still enough? Have we, in our sophistication, forgotten the fundamental lessons that are as solid as a house made of bricks? And if we were all stripped of our technology and comforts tomorrow, who among us would still remember how to survive?